If you're an overthinker and you cannot get your mind to stay quiet no matter how tired you are, no matter how much you try to distract yourself, no matter how much you tell yourself to just relax, then this video is for you. If you replay conversations from 3 days ago and suddenly feel stressed all over again, if you analyze someone's tone in a text message and convince yourself something is wrong, if you create worst-case scenarios in your head before anything has even happened, then I want you to stay with me because we are going to unpack what is really going on. Overthinking is exhausting, and the hardest part about it is that it feels like you cannot control it, and sometimes you even feel frustrated with yourself because you know you are thinking too much, but you cannot seem to stop. So today we are going to talk about why you overthink everything, what it actually means about your nervous system and your past experiences, and most importantly, how you can slowly start calming your mind in a realistic way. First, let's clear something up. Overthinking is not just thinking deeply, and it is not just being analytical, because some people are naturally thoughtful and reflective, and that is healthy. Overthinking is when your thoughts loop, repeat, spiral, and create anxiety instead of clarity. And instead of helping you solve a problem, they make you feel worse. It is when your brain treats every situation like it is dangerous, like it is high stakes, like one wrong move will cost you everything. And that right there is the key, because overthinking is usually not about intelligence, it is about safety. Your brain thinks it is protecting you. When you overthink, your nervous system is in alert mode, and your brain is scanning for threats, even when you are safe. Maybe you grew up in an environment where you had to read the room carefully, where one wrong word could lead to conflict, where you had to anticipate people's moods in order to protect yourself. Maybe you were criticized a lot, so now your brain double-checks everything before and after you say it. Maybe you experienced betrayal, so now your mind constantly searches for signs that it might happen again. Overthinking is often your brain trying to prevent pain before it happens. It is like your mind is saying, if I just think about this long enough, I can avoid being hurt. But here is the problem. Your brain does not know the difference between helpful thinking and obsessive looping, so it just keeps going. Overthinking and trauma. A lot of people do not realize that overthinking can be a trauma response, and trauma does not always mean something dramatic or extreme. It can simply mean repeated emotional stress. If you have ever felt blindsided, abandoned, embarrassed publicly, rejected unexpectedly, or emotionally unsafe in relationships, your brain may have learned that it needs to stay alert. So now when something small happens, like someone taking longer than usual to reply to a message, your mind fills in the blanks with fear, not because you are dramatic, but because your brain remembers what hurt you before. Overthinking is often memory mixed with imagination. The loop. Have you ever noticed how overthinking usually sounds like this in your head? What if I said the wrong thing? What if they are upset? What if I messed up? What if this goes wrong? And the more you think, the more anxious you feel. And the more anxious you feel, the more you think. That is the loop. And loops are hard to break because they feel productive, like you are doing something. But in reality, you are just draining yourself. If you are listening right now and thinking, this is literally me, then take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we are going to keep having these real conversations about emotional healing and mental clarity, and you do not have to figure this out alone. Overthinking shows up heavily in relationships because relationships feel high risk emotionally. If you have ever been hurt before, your brain tries to prevent that pain from repeating. So you analyze tone shifts, word choice, response time, body language, social media activity, everything. But the truth is, sometimes your mind is reacting to old pain, not present reality. And that is important because you cannot calm your mind by arguing with it, you calm your mind by reassuring it. The first thing you have to do, and I really mean this, is stop shaming yourself for overthinking. Because the moment you start criticizing yourself for having anxious thoughts, you are actually adding a second layer of anxiety on top of the first one, and now instead of just dealing with worry, you are dealing with worry plus self-judgment, and that combination makes everything heavier than it needs to be. A lot of people walk around saying things like, "Why am I like this?" or "I'm so annoying," or "I hate that I do this." And they think that being hard on themselves will somehow shock their brain into stopping. But your nervous system does not calm down when it feels attacked. It calms down when it feels safe. So instead of saying, "Why can't I just be normal?" try shifting your internal voice to something softer and more understanding, like, "Okay, my brain is trying to protect me right now," or "I must feeling unsafe about something, even if I can't fully see it yet." Because that small shift from criticism to curiosity can completely change the way your body responds to your thoughts. When you approach your overthinking with compassion instead of frustration, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, your nervous system slowly begins to settle, because it no longer feels like it has to defend you from yourself. The second thing you need to do is learn how to interrupt the thought loop gently instead aggressively, because a lot of people try to force themselves to stop saying things like, "Just stop," or "Don't think about it." And that almost always backfires, because the brain does not respond well to force, especially when it is already in a heightened state. Instead of trying to slam the door on your thoughts, try asking yourself a calm and grounding question like, "Is this thought actually helpful right now? Or is this based on something real in this moment? Or is this fear talking?" Because when you pause long enough to question the thought instead of automatically believing it, you create space between you and the spiral. And sometimes, honestly, not even have to be mental, it can be physical, because your mind and body are deeply connected. So something as simple as standing up and stretching your arms, walking to the kitchen to drink a glass of water, stepping outside to feel fresh air on your face, or even washing hands in cool water can signal to your nervous system that you are not in danger, which helps slow down the intensity of the spiral. You would be surprised how often movement resets what overthinking makes feel impossible. The third strategy is something I call delayed thinking. And this one is powerful because overthinking feeds on urgency. It convinces you that you must figure everything out right now, or something terrible will happen. When your brain is in overdrive, it creates a false sense of emergency, even when nothing is actually happening in front of you. So instead of trying to solve everything in the middle of anxiety, tell yourself, "I am not ignoring this, but I will revisit this in 1 hour." Or "I will think about this tomorrow when I am calmer." Because giving yourself permission to delay the thought reduces the pressure. And what you will notice if you really pay attention is that when you come back to the thought later, it rarely carries the same emotional charge, because urgency amplifies fear, but time exposes exaggeration. Most overthinking loses its power when it is not treated like an emergency. The goal here is not to become someone who never has anxious thoughts. The goal is to become someone who knows how to respond to those thoughts in a way that does not escalate them. And that is a skill you can absolutely build, even if right now your mind feels louder than you would like it to be. Nighttime overthinking. Nighttime is honestly for overthinkers, because the world, the distractions fade away, the notifications slow down, the conversations stop, and suddenly your brain decides that this is the perfect time to replay every awkward moment, every unfinished task, every relationship issue, every what-if scenario that it could possibly find. And it can feel like your mind's into a loud room the moment the lights go off. During the day, you might be busy enough to outrun your thoughts, but at night there is nothing buffering you from them, and that silence can feel uncomfortable because it forces you to sit with everything you pushed aside earlier. But here is something important that most people do not realize. Nighttime overthinking is rarely random. It is usually unprocessed emotion from the day that did not get acknowledged. And when your body finally slows down, your brain tries to catch up. Maybe something small irritated you and you brushed it off. Maybe a comment bothered you and you pretended it didn't. Maybe you felt anxious about something and kept yourself distracted instead of sitting with it. And when night comes and everything is quiet, those emotions show up asking to be addressed. Your brain is not trying to torture you. It is trying to process what you did not have space to process earlier. That is why fighting your thoughts aggressively at night usually makes them louder, because when you try to shut them down with force, your nervous system interprets that as more tension. Instead of fighting the thoughts, try gently giving them somewhere to go. One of the simplest but most powerful tools is journaling, and not in a formal or structured way, but literally grabbing a notebook and letting your thoughts spill out exactly as they are, messy, emotional, unfinished, without trying to make them sound intelligent or organized. When you take the thoughts out of your head and put them onto paper, something shifts, because your brain no longer has to keep looping them in order to remember them. A lot of overthinking happens because your brain is afraid you will forget something important, so it keeps repeating it, but once it sees the thought written down, it relaxes a little because now the information feels stored somewhere safe. You can even say to yourself while you are writing, "Okay, I see you, I hear you, we will deal with this tomorrow," because sometimes your mind just wants acknowledgement. Your brain just wants to feel heard. And when you start treating your nighttime overthinking like a signal instead of a flaw, it becomes easier to work with it instead of against it. The goal is not to force silence. The goal is to create enough emotional safety that your mind does not feel the need to shout. Here is the final truth that I really want you to sit with and really absorb, because this is the part that shifts everything if you allow it to, and it changes the way you see your overthinking, something that feels like a flaw into something that simply needs refinement. The goal is not someone who never thinks deeply, because thinking deeply is not the problem, and being reflective a weakness, and being emotionally aware is actually a strength when it is balanced. But the real goal is to become someone whose thoughts control them. Someone who can observe a thought without immediately believing it. Someone who can feel anxiety rise without assuming it is truth. And someone who can pause long enough to choose a calmer response instead of automatically spiraling. You do not need to erase your mind or shut it down or become detached from your emotions. Because the issue was never that you think too much. The issue is that your thoughts learn to operate from a place of protection and urgency instead of safety and trust. A lot of overthinkers have never been taught that there is a difference between having a thought and becoming consumed by it. And once you understand that difference, you begin to realize that you are not broken, you are not dramatic, and you are not weak for struggling with mental loops that feel hard to control. At some point in your life, overthinking likely helped you survive something, whether that was instability, betrayal, emotional unpredictability, or constantly feeling like you had to be one step ahead in order to avoid being hurt. And your brain adapted by becoming hyper-aware, hyper-analytical, and constantly scanning for potential problems so that you would never be caught off guard again. For a season of your life, that probably worked because it kept you alert and prepared and ready, and it may have even protected you from deeper pain. But coping mechanisms that protect us in one chapter can exhaust us in another, and what once felt like safety can slowly start to feel like mental prison when the threat is no longer present, but the pattern is still running. Just because something helped you survive does not mean you have to carry it forever. And growth is not about criticizing who you were or shaming the ways you coped. It is about recognizing that you are in a different season now, and your nervous system needs an update. Updating your system does not mean attacking yourself or forcing your thoughts into silence or pretending anxiety does not exist. It means gently teaching your mind that you are safer now than you used to be, reminding your nervous system that not every situation is a threat, and practicing responding instead of reacting so that your thoughts no longer dictate your emotional state. Growth is not about becoming a completely different person. It is about becoming a regulated and grounded version of who you already are, which means you can still be thoughtful and emotionally intelligent and observant without being trapped in endless spirals that drain your energy. You are not broken for having developed a coping strategy that once kept you safe, but you are allowed to evolve beyond it. And that evolution begins the moment you realize that your thoughts are powerful, but they do not have to run your life. If this helped you even a little bit, please Please like this video and subscribe to the channel because we are building a space where normal and growth is safe. And share this with someone you know who struggles with overthinking, because sometimes people just need to hear that they are not crazy and they are not alone. And remember, your mind is powerful, but it does not have to run your life. Take a deep breath, and I will see you in the next conversation.